Hey guys, what is going on? It is Nick Kleitch, the host of the Life with Nick podcast. We are back in the booth today. And with me is the first lady that got invited on the show. She's someone that I've gotten to know just over the course of my career. We've had a lot of good conversations around agriculture, some banking stuff, and also some personal development material. We're going to be bouncing all over the board today within those kind of subcategories, but at any rate, Mackenzie, how's it going?
Hey Nick, it's going great.
Beautiful. So apparently, this is the first podcast that you've ever done. Is that true?
Yes, this is the very first one.
Awesome. Well, I'm hoping it's a good experience. And just to get us started off on a really easy, comfortable note here. So as far as like us getting to know each other, did so through the career path that I'm on. But if you wouldn't mind, if you want to talk just a little bit about your upbringing, and then let's go into kind of how you grew up and then your move up to the
Yeah.
Twin Cities.
So, yeah, I guess starting off, I grew up in a small town, just pretty much smack dab in the middle of Iowa. Um, and I say small, and I mean like there was 12,000 people in the town. So compared to the Twin Cities now, it's um, quite a bit smaller. But then I know there's some people that grew up in extremely small towns that had like 500 people. So small's relative, right? But grew up in a small town, mom, dad, and then I have a younger brother that's about 5.5 or 6 years younger than me. Um, Kind of grew up like on the outskirts of town. So we didn't officially live in the country and we didn't officially, but we lived in town, but it was kind of like right on the edge there. So grew up hunting with my dad, doing four wheelers, tons of fun, went camping a lot, did a lot of baseball games. My brother was really big into baseball and football. So that's kind of what life was like
Nice.
growing up a little bit.
Beautiful. So if I recall correctly, so did you guys farm with your intermediate family, or
Yeah.
was that grandparents, or just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So none of my family grew up on a farm. My mom and dad didn't. I guess my mom lived on a farm for the first 3 years of her life, but then my grandparents moved in town, and same with my dad's parents too. They didn't farm or grow up on a farm. And so I was kind of like an ag transplant, I guess. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but um, drank the ag Kool-Aid, I guess is how my dad says it. But um, did not have any farm background, just really enjoyed always being outside. And then actually the way I kind of got interested and started a passion for agriculture was through the FFA.
Mm,
And like starting off high school freshman year, I was like, oh, what am I going to do for my elective? Because I don't really want to do art. Like I'm not super artistic. And like I had some friends that did agriculture, took ag classes, and I'm like, yeah, I didn't grow up on a farm. I don't know anything about ag. Like, why would I take an ag class? And so I took a computer science class first semester and I hated it. Like, I mean, it was okay and it's good. Like, I'm glad I did it because I learn computer stuff now. But just was not my thing. I did not want to sit through 4 more years of that. So, second semester, I'm like, all right, like, my friends are bugging me to take ag classes. They say it's not hard at all. And so I took an ag class and had a crazy FFA teacher and basically like handed me a book and said, "Hey, read this and sit in this spot." And that's what we did for class. We practiced this conduct of meetings, which is a career development event competition in FFA. And little did I know we were actually going to be competing at like sub-district conference. And so like a
oh,
week before yeah, my ag teacher was like, "Oh yeah, hey, like next week we're going to this place. You need to be wearing this stuff," which is like official dress. So if anybody's ever seen FFA, it's like the blue corduroy jackets and black pants. And I was like, "Wait, we're doing this for real?" I was like shocked that we were act like, but that was my ag teacher freshman year. He just kind of like pushed you into it, and I fell in love with it. And so, and I'm glad he did. I'm glad he kind of like pushed me into it, because I wouldn't be where I am without it.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like just to give the listener some context, so Iowa to begin with, extremely agriculture driven. Midwest, one could say the same thing there. And then Ames and the Des Moines area, and also Cedar Rapids, are fairly populated, as you're alluding to. But most of Iowa is very rural, very agriculture
Mhm.
driven. So it's nice to know that you got a little bit of taste of both, honestly, before you moved up to the Twin Cities. And then with that, you had mentioned FFA being this kind of core initial, let's say, element to things. What was that, do you think, that called to you? Was it just the projects? Was it how the culture was established? I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but I'm curious.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. But I want to touch on something, because I would not be doing my duty if I didn't highlight how awesome Iowa and agriculture are, specifically
Mm-mm.
in Iowa. So, like, Iowa's literally a powerhouse, number one in hog production, number one in corn production, solar energy, which some people debate if that's ag or not, but they're all on farm fields, all the wind energy. And so, big powerhouse. Iowa's pretty awesome. Like, number one egg layer in the nation. So, has the most eggs that laid or produced in Iowa, which is kind of
I'll
cool.
take it.
But yeah, so side note about how awesome Iowa is in agriculture. But to your question about FFA and what it was that kind of like really just pulled me in, I think it was a couple of different things. So it was like the career development events and personal development, like lean, and a lot of what you do in FFA is either showing animals, which I didn't grow up on a farm, didn't live on a farm, so I couldn't show animals because I didn't have any. But
Mm.
I asked my dad if I could have a horse, and we had a big yard, and he's like, "No, you can't." So that was out. But so then the options were like career development events, and that was a big focus on personal development and leadership. And I mean, it's contests like conduct of meetings. So, like, running a meeting with parliamentary procedure, which is the like, I move to do this and I second that, and then discussion and
Mm.
voting. And so that's kind of like parliamentary procedure, which honestly has helped me today, because there's a lot of meetings that I'm in that use parliamentary procedure, um, to run their meetings in a timely manner, or to run meetings kind of appropriately. And then it's things too, like public speaking, where I did that contest my junior year. And then you write a speech of something you're passionate about, and then you memorize it, and then you present it to judges, and then you answer questions based on it. And so the personal development was really key, and that was really like one of the things that pulled me in. Another thing that pulled me in was just like the community. Like, the people
Mm.
were super supportive. I felt like I could be myself. Like, like, high school is kind of a weird time when you're like figuring yourself out, and you're like, all right, who am I? Am I like one of the popular kids? Am I like one of the jocks? Am I like a weird, not fitting in any of those groups? Um, and and I think you're just trying to make connections with people, and you're trying to make friends in high school, and you just want to be accepted for who you are. And I felt like I could do that in FFA. Like, I could learn lots of fun stuff. I could go to conferences, and like, I mean, like, you go to national FFA convention and it's like 50,000, at least when I was doing it. It's probably way more now. Like 50,000 FFA students from all across the United States. And you're just like,
Wow.
everyone's here, everyone's excited, everyone's super nice. And like, you can just go up and talk to a random stranger. And so it was like, just like a big sense of like community, and like, hey, I belong to something that's like way bigger than myself. I think that was almost probably even more so of a drawing factor than the personal development stuff, but it kind of is all intertwined.
Man, for not having, or I should say, that's an unscripted response that you just gave, but that was pretty dang good, I would say, for just going right off the cuff there.
Well, I did end up being a state FFA officer, and so we got a lot of like, here's how you like plug the industry and the organization, and it's I gotta do a lot of really cool things. We got to go out to Washington D.C. and work with lobbyists. Like I got to facilitate workshops with younger kids. I spoke in
Cool.
front of 5,000 people, which I never thought I'd do in my entire life. Like that was so crazy. Probably I can't even fathom that I've done that, but I did, and it was great. And so yeah, big plug for the FFA. It's a great organization.
Yeah, well, I feel like to go back to your comments on the high school, kind of figuring out oneself, what a perfect place to fall into if you're
Yeah.
going through that, and then you just have this beautiful structure that allows you to do a ton of things. And um, let me ask this question as far as FFA goes, and then we'll continue on to kind of career choice and on to maybe today with some stuff. What is a misconception, do you think, about FFA? I know it's pretty standard to be like, hey, what is it about? But what's a misconception maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think the misconception is that is just farmers. So FFA stands for Future
Mm.
Farmers of America, but actually, and here's my state officer like textbook answer, but in in the 80s, they changed their name to the National FFA Organization to promote the growing diversity in the ag industry. And so it's not just people that are farmers or want to be farmers. It's way more than that. There's a ton of science involved in it now, like a lot of, you know, in the ag field in general, there's a ton of science involved. And so that kind of trickles down to the FFA organization as well. But it's also like, yes, you can do the traditional ag and farming things like restoring tractors, showing at the state fair. But then there's also this personal development piece of it that like I'm a huge testimony. I didn't grow up on a farm, but I was still really involved and can have a passion for something like agriculture. And so I think that's the biggest misconception is that it's just for farmers and you have to be a farmer to do it. And I to that I say no, that's not the case.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because I honestly didn't even know that. I thought it was more of like you just are associated if it's ag and you're around farming or within that. And people around here can call you out for not knowing some of that stuff. That's why I speak very high level when I talk about agriculture because I've been called out many times. But
Yeah.
um, that's really awesome to not only learn that about you because obviously we've had prior conversations, but just to know how transformational that
Hmm.
organization was. And I'm sure for many other people, they got the opportunity to do that. So let's fast forward a little bit, Mackenzie, to this kind of finance and this kind of banking as a whole piece to the pie.
Yeah. So I feel like I just sort of fell into things in my life, right? Like I kind of pushed back against taking an ag class and being an FFA, but then I like fell into it and loved it. And kind of same thing with the finance and banking. Like I was wanted needed a job in high school and there was a credit union that advertised at our high school that they had a teller position available and so I interviewed for it and got the job, which I'm like, man, this is a really cool job. And I'm in high school being a teller. And so was super excited about that. But then thinking about what I wanted to do for college, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm a teller. I like this banking stuff. I like agriculture. Like, I guess that kind of puts together to be an ag banker, an ag lender. And so I'm like, well, what can I go to school for? Well, I guess ag business. So that's kind of how the finance and business came into it. And then like freshman year of college, I'm like, man, I don't have an internship lined up. And it was getting towards the end of the year. And then a internship with a pretty large commercial bank just kind of fell in my lap. And um, so yeah, it's like it's crazy how things just kind of work out. But I feel like I kind of just fell into the banking and industry.
Yeah, that's fair. I feel like that almost found you, which is really
Yeah,
cool
it for
because
sure.
as a youngster, you're just so so confused and so curious about the world. You have no idea what any of these professions do. And then now that you have a little bit of, you get banged up from the marketplace a little bit, you learn some tough lessons. But um, no, it's a great industry. And as I've learned more about it, I just have an appreciation for how that industry serves people and serves businesses and serves farms. And um, it's just a kind of a unique path to not necessarily like just selling insurance or selling seed or what have you. It's like this very large staple because for farming, and maybe you can speak on this more, like you're going to always have to need an entity to lean on to get projects either funded or get machinery funded. So just out of like a very high level one-on-one, how do you like interpret that world, like just agriculture and banking in general, and how they like coexist with each other?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things I didn't realize before going into banking and before my internships was how much money the world in general needs to run. Like businesses require a ton of money to operate. But you as a consumer, you're just driving down the street, you're going to the grocery store, you're going to the gas station or convenience store, and you're just like in your happy world, and you don't think about, all right, this company had to pay a lot of money to finance the inventory to get it on the shelves so I can buy it, and they're having to pay for their staff. They had to pay for this building and construction costs and 100 different things. They have to pay for insurance, and then if they're borrowing money, they have to pay interest rates, and all of these things go into how much money a company has to pay. And and it's a like for some of these companies that are extremely large, like it's very interesting. Like I'd challenge people to go out in a publicly held company. You can go and see their financial statements and look up their annual report, and go look
Mm,
up an annual report for a pretty large publicly held company and see how much debt they have. It You'll probably be amazed. But and I feel like that's the same in agriculture too. It's everything takes money. You know, you're building a feed mill. It takes a lot of money to build a feed mill. You're fine a lot of C stores. You're financing convenience store inventory. If you're selling seed or chemicals or fertilizer, you have to finance that inventory. And then you as a farmer, you might not pay for it right away because you can have 30 days to pay for something by the time you get it sometimes, depending on what account receivable policies there are. And it just, you got to finance, your feed mill. All right. So if you're building a brand new feed mill, day one, you're not having any income, but you have all these expenses building the actual
mm.
building. And so you're not getting the income for that, so you need to finance it. And so it's like, I don't know, money makes the world go around, I guess. And it's the same in agriculture.
Yeah, but it's cool that you could speak on some of that stuff because, like, yes, you probably know and talk about that every day. So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I already knew that. But like for someone like myself or someone listening in, it's like, yeah, there's so much more to what meets the eye, and that's why I wanted to give you a little bit of a platform to speak on that a little bit. So this is firing from the hip, but I do have a curiosity here. So. What is the story on corporate farms versus the startup farm, so to speak, or smaller farming operations? And I'll preface by saying, much like a small business has its own operating system. Maybe you have a team of five, maybe you have a team of three. You know, you can run your coffee shop and do what you need to do. Generally, the owner of that small business is really involved in that business and maybe making the product and selling and doing other things. But in farming, very much in the same light, you know, your employees are obviously with on the farm. And then there is this concept of kind of maybe mid-size to large size farming operations. So before I butcher anything else within that setup, I wanted to just kind of ask, what are you seeing out there? And please just expand on any direction that you want to go with that.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. Um, so I think you're right in small businesses. small farming operations, the key players wear a lot of hats. You have to be an accountant, and you have to be a manager of people, and you have to be a repairman sometimes. And so you have a lot of different hats that you have to wear because you just you're a small business. You can't have 100 people on staff. You might only have one or two or three or six. And so you have to wear a lot more hats when you're in a small business. And I think because of that, each player is very key and plays a key role in that business and keeping that business alive. So, what's going on in the world right now? There's a labor shortage. And
Mm,
I think that is one reason that there can be benefits to having larger farms or larger organizations, because you can optimize, you can utilize, you have people that specialize in being an accountant. And so when you have a company that has 1,000 or 10,000 employees, you can have a team of accountants, and that's all they do, and they're really good and really efficient at it. You have a
mm,
team of mechanics, and they fix stuff, and they're really good and really efficient. And you don't have one person that has to, like, all right, now I have to figure out how to do this accounting stuff, because let me look it up and let me Google a couple answers because I'm not sure, or I got to call the software company that does our accounting and ask them questions because things are going wrong. And so I think, like, when you scale, you can have more efficiency, which is one of the reasons that you um, see companies merge or acquire other companies to get that scale. Um,
mm.
and I think large ag in general gets a bad rep too, because it's like, oh, all these like big corporate like factory farms are like ruining the world and causing climate change. And
Yeah.
um, now, while maybe there's a tiny bit of truth in that, in certain circumstances, I think we need to also give the benefit of the doubt to a lot of these companies, because there are some very, very large companies that are still family owned. and
Mm,
and so they're not that, like, quote, factory farm, but they're still a very large organization. But it's family run. The third and fourth generation are involved. um, and and so that's a little bit of my thought process. Like, I think we all like to, like, all right, who's the victim? Like, these big companies are killing the small guys. And there's some truth to that, because when you're more efficient as a large company, you can charge less. um, and when you're a smaller company, you might have a little bit more overhead, and so you need to charge a little bit more, and you can't necessarily be as price competitive on things. um, so there's a little bit of truth in all of that, but most of the time companies get large or merge together out of necessity.
mm.
It's labor shortages, like, hey, we're missing some office people. You guys have a ton of office people. Or my CEO's retiring and we don't have anybody to fill his spot because our company is headquartered in a 1,000 population town, and so we need to find someone that we can merge with, and they have a younger CEO that we can utilize and can kind of take over both companies. So I mean, I think there's also a place for both. There's a place for the small farms and companies, and they can fill a need that the large companies can't. So
Absolutely.
there's definitely pros and cons with both of them.
Well, you handled that very complex question very, very well. Couple of follow-up things on that, just out of good kind of. There's a couple different themes that stemmed out of there. So first off, do you see a lot of either startup farms, smaller scale farms, or are those dissipating? As you had mentioned, that merging and coming together may come out of necessity just for market purposes.
Yeah, you see. So in the ag industry, there's kind of two separate um, business types. There's a farm where they're actually doing the producing um, of crops or livestock, and then there's the business, like an agribusiness, where they're processing some of those goods.
Mm.
And so you're seeing a lot of startup agribusiness companies, especially in the tech space. Like agriculture is
Ah,
pretty behind on tech. And so it's like, all right, there's a ton of cool companies that are putting out new innovations and trying new things, precision agriculture, drones, like, hey, how can we bring farming into the 21st century and give them smartphone apps that can do make their lives easier as a farmer. And so you're seeing a lot of those like agribusiness companies, small startups, especially in the tech and innovation space. On the farmer and producer level, I think you're seeing less of it. You're still seeing some, but you're seeing less of it because there's pretty big barriers to entry. It takes a lot of
ah,
capital to get started. If you're going to be a grain farmer and grow corn and soybeans or another crop that's grown in the ground, um, you have to buy land or you have to rent land, and then you have to wait an entire year potentially until you get money from that crop. And so you're seeing less and less of those farmers getting, like, less and less new farms or
sure.
farmers unless they grew up in it, unless they're like, oh, my dad farmed, I'm going to inherit the family farm, that type of thing. Like, on a quick side note, I did hear a really cool story about how there was a guy who played a farming simulator game on YouTube and made these videos of him playing this game, and blew up, was super famous, tons of followers, tons of subscribers, made a ton of money from YouTube, and he ended up taking that money and using it to buy a farm so he can start farming in the real world.
Oh,
And so I'm
oh
like,
man.
this is so cool. Like, that's what a innovative kid, or, young adult now,
That
I'm sure, but like,
that
that's just
is
cool.
the millennial and Gen Z just I love hearing that so
Yeah.
much because you had someone that was being creative, they had a passion, they were doing it in a new school space, and then it converted over. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So to to bring us back to what you were speaking on, excuse me. It does sound like the let's say the individual that would want to start up in farming that doesn't have some resources around them to begin with is kind of falling off a little bit. I'm not sure if that's the correct way to phrase it, so if you want to correct me, feel free to do so. um, but let's move a little bit to more of the corporate farming. And I know you mentioned earlier on some of the common misconceptions and whatnot. And the moment you brought that up, I was like, we're going to circle back to that, and we'll definitely get to the tech and AI part of the things too. But when you hear, let's say, consumers or social media or what have you that kind of come at these entities, what maybe irks you in a way that says, hey, you got to remember this, this, and this. Or actually, let's just start there because I'll have a secondary
Yeah.
question, but I want you to run with that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you've been in my brain the last couple of months because this is something that I think about and is a big focus of mine, being in the industry that I'm in. And I think the biggest thing that upsets me when I hear people like coming at agriculture, or and when they come at ag, it's like ag in general. It's like farming is bad. Like,
Such a
I could,
blanket statement.
yeah, I could list off, like, I mean, I'm sure everyone's heard the like cow farts are killing the environment. Like, that just kind of frustrates me, is a nice way to put it, because people that say that are typically repeating talking points that they've heard, and they're not actually
Mm,
doing the research themselves. And so I think the biggest frustration that I have when I hear people talking bad about agriculture, most of the time, now I'll give leave room for the percentage of time, maybe it's 5 or 10% of the time, that people that are hating on the ag industry are very educated and know what they're talking about. Like, I know that that is the case sometimes, but I feel like a majority of the time, people that are hating on the industry is because they're uneducated about it and they don't take time to really understand. They're just repeating some talking points. And
mm,
I heard something in a conference that I attended about a year and a half ago. And it was talking about consumers and how consumers are emotion driven. They're not fact driven anymore. And when I
So
heard that,
true.
I'm like, light bulb went off. Like, it makes so much sense, not only in the ag industry, but like in a ton of other industries too. It's like, all right. And then I think about myself. I am driven by my emotions more than I am by facts in some cases, but it's like, all right, at least I try and take a step back in my personal life and be like, all
Mhm.
right, I hear this talking point. I hear people saying this and they're giving this argument. Like, I want to dig into that and know the facts behind it so that way I can know that what I'm saying is true or not, or at least be educated on the topic. So, yeah, rambling a little bit, but I think
No,
that's
you're good.
like uneducated consumers and uneducated comments is huge. There's a topic that I learned about recently. It's like called the iceberg of ignorance, where
Okay.
like like you're and maybe I'm getting this mixed up, so maybe we can cut this out. But like the like it's what you see 10%, and then all, like you can only see 10% of the iceberg, so 90% is under the surface. And it's like, all right, most of the time we only see the 10%, the headline, we repeat that talking point, and we don't understand all of the stuff that's kind of underneath the water, the other 90% that's going into that talking point. And I think about it in journalism, and we see a headline of a news article, and what do media sources want to do? They want to elicit some kind of emotion from their readers. And so their headline is the most emotion driven headline that they can think of. And then it's like you read the article and it's like, oh yeah, isn't actually that bad at all. Like, but the headline. And so I think that's kind of like where the iceberg comes from. And but people don't look underneath the surface. They just kind of look at the iceberg and they don't see everything else.
Yeah. A lot of good stuff there, and I that's why I wanted to kind of give you that nice, good
Yeah,
T-ball pitch in there, so you could go on that a little bit. Um, the other point I would like to bring up with that is a little bit to do with agriculture, maybe also just consumer culture as well too. Is that people are extremely naive to processes, and what I mean by that is what you're purchasing, as you alluded to very early in the podcast, is that's the 10% that you see. It's the 90% that is so lost in translation as to why you can even get these things to begin with. And it is frustrating because it's so easy to see 10% and bitch and complain about 10%, even though had you seen 90%, you would be like, whoa, this is like totally a different story. And shit, people need to just be more grateful. I mean, we live in America, for gosh sakes, where you can
yeah,
go accessibly buy these things at Aldi, at Hy-Vee, at wherever you need to go. And this is a little bit of a personal tangent for me, but it's like throughout human history, the one staple that has been basically our power has been agriculture. You need to eat food at the end of the day. So, it's like this is not a new thing. And how it gets done, we need to obviously have efficiencies to feed however many millions of people we need to feed. So if there's a complaint about how it's processed or how it gets there, it's just maybe not in the correct light and in ignorant light, like that concept was um, kind of alluding
yeah.
to. I do have a question, but if you have to add any, or if you want to add
I
anything
do.
else, go ahead and run with that. Yeah.
I have a ton to add. So this, like, when you want to get off the ag like topic and kind of train that we're on, like, let me know and we can like get off that. But um yeah, to your point about like we live in America, like exactly. We have so much choice in America and we are so privileged to just live in this country. Even if you're some of the less privileged people that live in America, you're still very privileged compared to what people in other countries have. Like there's a large percentage of the world that lives on less than $2 a day. And my Starbucks coffee this morning was $7. But then there are other people in the world that live on less than $2 a day. Just like think about that. Could you live on $2 a day? I couldn't. And so I think we just need to sometimes take a step back and realize like how grateful, or like, yeah, take a step back and realize how good we actually have it, and the fact that we do have choices in things. I can choose milk, or I can choose oat milk or almond milk or cashew milk, or like there's a million different kinds of milk now. And like I have that choice. Like not everybody has that choice. So like that's one comment I wanted to make. Another one is marketers do a very good job at their jobs. Like they're marketers, and most of the time they're doing a great job. I think one of the things that the dairy industry got wrong is that they allowed plant-based milk to be called milk. It's like, okay, milk
Mm.
should only be something that's produced from a cow. But now we have oat milk, and it's not really oat milk. Like I drink oat milk, but it's not milk. It's more like oat juice, or so I think
Or a
that's something we
concentrate.
got.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the meat industry is facing it right now too with plant-based meats. And it's like they didn't get ahead of that. Like how can you call an impossible burger one a burger or meat? Like it's not. It's a bunch of vegetables and synthetic chemicals and sodium all put in a patty that makes it sound and somewhat taste like meat. Personally, I've revolted and I haven't tried it, but I know people that have, and they're like, yeah, it just doesn't really taste good. Or there's like plant based chicken now where you can get chicken nuggets that are plant based. And it's like, it doesn't even taste like chicken, but yet we're calling it a chicken. And it, like, an animal didn't have to die for this. And so there are people that are like promoting that. But it's like, should it really be called chicken if it didn't come from a literal animal called a chicken? So that's kind of a tangent. And then I'm curious to ask you a question on this like marketing kind of ploy. So in the egg industry, you go to the grocery store and there's a bunch of different cartons of eggs. And you can choose like regular eggs that are just like large grade A eggs, or there's options like cage free or organic. And so I'm going to ask, what is the difference? Or when you think cage free, what do you think of? How was that chicken raised?
So, if I may, I'm
Yeah.
gonna give a little bit of detail and then I will answer the question. So I'm
Yeah.
sorry
Okay.
I'm not so simple to
No.
do that, but um, so one thing that I think is very annoying is the fact that we're running away from truth so much on this exact topic. It's like
Amen. Yeah.
if we are trying to go plant based, that is totally fine, right? That's your prerogative. However, we cannot pretend that meat is not meat. So I don't know why it's such a challenge for us to kind of blend these two together. Because I know people that are vegan, I know people that are vegetarian, I know people that are carnivore, and I just don't understand why we're trying so hard to like intermingle these things when the baseline of the food itself is literally what it is. There's absolutely no need to change that. So that was my little response to that. But go ahead, yeah.
Well, if you're a yeah, if you're a vegan, why do you want to eat meat? Isn't that what the whole point of being a vegan is? Is like I'm not eating meat. And so, yeah, like I think that's just a little like getting me a little bit passionate and excited, but, like, but what you said, running away from truth, like, that's 100% true. Like, if you're vegan, like,
Right.
live that, like, let me
Absolutely.
just eat plants, you know? Why
And
why do
to
we need this meat? And I have theories on that, but I'll spare you from them.
well, we might get around to that in the
Yeah,
podcast, but and going back to the milk comment that you made earlier, another perfect example. It's just milk. It
yeah.
doesn't need to be these other alterations. It's just milk. And ironically, like they kind of do that with everything, with like water, sometimes even with alcohol. I don't know what the whole like getting off thing is about trying to blend all these things together and make it more confusing. Just like it is what it is. But anyway, to go back to answer your question, I was actually going to bring us here eventually to
Ooh,
not necessarily the egg question, but also just the kind of the treatment of animals, let's say,
mm,
and maybe some things behind that. But I would say if I will answer honestly, that to me, cage free would be simply that they're able to, let's say, move around a little bit, that they're not put specifically. in a cage. So there's my answer. I will let you destroy that as you deem fit.
Well, I feel like that's like the cop out answer, right? Like cage free, they're not put in a cage. But so to dig into that a little bit more, like do they have access outside? Like in your head when you picture cage free,
Oh,
tell me what it looks like.
yeah. Okay. Great question. And I should have known you were maybe pitching that as the question, not
Yes,
as a literal sense.
that's
But
okay.
to me, I envision a setup like a hog building where there's gates and hogs are in different sections and they're just living within those sections and you're trying to keep them alive. You're trying to keep them nurtured. So that's what I would say is cage free. I wouldn't necessarily consider that like completely just like free roaming around.
Yeah.
They would be in a facility, but they're not on top of each other, literally in a cage.
Yeah. Well, you're a lot closer than most people are. And so I feel like I've asked a couple people this question that are not involved in the ag industry at all. And they're like, oh, when I picture cage free, I think that they, can roam around wherever they want. They get to go outside and if they want. And it's like, nope, that's free range. Like free range is outside, pecking in the
Mm,
grass. Cage free, I challenge people to go look up a cage free egg laying barn, Google it, and then Google a conventional egg laying barn, and they will look almost identical. The only difference is the stacked structure just does not have a face on it. And so there's three sides, but then there's just not a face. So the chicken is free to move around. She can jump down on the floor. She can jump on different levels of the um, stack. I don't know the official term for it, but she can move around. She can fly across because there's an kind of an open flyway, and she can walk on the ground. But it looks very similar, and it's interesting. Chickens are nesting animals, and so when you're laying an egg as a chicken, you want to go in your little nest in your coop and kind of be in an enclosed space because that's where you feel safe from if there are predators. And so the chickens actually like to be kind of like in more of a confined space, but then, I'm sure they love walking around too. But when you do have chickens that can interact with each other, there's a lot of other unintended consequences that you have to think about. You have to put toys in there, like metal pie tins, and sometimes they have curtains down the middle so they can't fly too much. They have to hop down and then hop kind of up the other side. But because they can be mean with each other, they can start pecking at each other. They can be pretty brutal sometimes. So that some of these toys help combat that. And but yeah, that's just a challenge for the listeners and people that don't know. Go Google what it is, and cage free looks very similar to a conventional egg laying facility, and all of that to go back and say marketers do a really good job because there are people out there who will pay more to have cage free eggs. And it does cost more to produce an egg that's cage free versus a conventional egg for a lot of reasons that I could go into, but I'll spare you all. But
no,
um,
you're good. This is a very perfect integration to both sides of the conversation that we've had because I'll bring it all together, but I'll
yeah,
also ask you this follow up.
yeah,
So we talked a little bit about startup farming, corporate farming. We talked a little bit about just kind of what we talked about on food quality and how marketing has truly distorted reality. Honestly, if we want to fire straight.
yeah,
So let's say, for example, I want to get very nutrient dense food from the produce or the produce that it is coming to me as. I think that I personally may be more cognizant than others, but is it sustainable to have these smaller farming operations be able to produce the food that would be produced with these larger kind of corporate farms? Because I think where people get tripped up is that they want to come at farming, and that's fine because people, freedom of speech or whatnot. But I think that they fail to realize the only way it's possible to service so many people to eat so they're not fucking starving is to have that kind of process and entity. So I'm hoping that spurred up some motivation for you, and you can take the baton and run with it.
yeah, for sure. This has been a topic too that's been a debate for a long time of like, all right, can we feed the world on organic food? Can we feed the world on, and it's not even cage free versus caged eggs. And like, so the first part of your question, like nutritionally, a cage free egg and a conventionally produced egg is no different. Like it's same nutritional value. And
Mm,
and same thing with some of these other practices of raising livestock. It's like you're still going to get the same product. It's just treatment of the animal. And to the point of treatment of the animal, I'm going to tell you, I have not met a single farmer or business owner out there who does not prioritize the health and well-being of their animals. They put a lot of time and a lot of money into making sure that animal is happy, and that because there is studies out there that show animals that are stressed, and it's been a lot of studies in beef, and there's a very brilliant woman called Temple Grandin who there's like movies and books written about her, but she actually like reinvented how slaughterhouses for and beef packing plants are configured to make the animal less stressed as they're going in to be
wow.
harvested. And one of the things that she talked about is like, okay, cows as they're moving in kind of like a curvature, they're just following the person in front of them, they're curving around, no harsh turns, no things dangling on the walls that are making them nervous and scared. And and so they go in a lot easier. They're just like, oh, happy cow. And then all of a sudden, boom, all right, now we're harvesting this animal. And there's been studies shown that an animal that's stressed does change the meat. Different. I don't think a ton of nutritional differences, but just has a different taste. Like it's more, I'm really bad at like the terms with all of this, but it's not as tender, the meat. And I think the same thing is like kind of found in dairy cows. Like, and there's some dairy companies out there, like what's the commercial, like happy cows or is one of the main taglines on a dairy commercial. And so, but it's true. It's like you can taste the stress in the animal. And it probably takes the like sommeliers of beef or dairy to like understand that taste difference. Like I probably wouldn't be able to taste it, but um, I think there are differences. And so yeah, people really care about the well-being of their animals. Um, and I forgot. I think I'm lost on where we were at before.
No worries, I got us. But and I think to maybe provide perspective on that, us humans even struggle with the are we in stress, fight or flight mode, and how do we perform? Because like yes, we don't talk about human meat per se, but we're animals at the end of the day. So imagine you, not you personally, but as a listener, psychologically going through something that, granted, we have a conscience, so we know that we're not, we would know we'd go get slaughtered. But anyway, like there's definitely room to have that open conversation of like stress meat would taste different and would be different quality because of the conditions of those things. And that's a good thing for you to bring up too, because I'm like learning along as you are talking, and I can see how that would be a vital piece. Because like yes, as a common consumer, and maybe I'm slightly elevated because I am very big into fitness and wellness, and so like I yes desire to spend a little bit more for good quality. But at the end of the day, I know that generally speaking, I'm going to have healthier food than per se if I'm in a different
Right.
country or having to buy elsewhere.
Well,
So,
and
um,
building off of that a little bit, I think it goes back to the discussion of choice. And here, you someone, you care a lot about nutrition. It's you have a lot of choices. And so you can choose to buy, if we're talking produce, you can choose to buy produce. Or if you want grass-fed beef, which is a whole nother like side tangent that I could get into. But if you want grass-fed beef, you can pay for grass-fed beef and you can buy that. Like, but the thing we have to think about in agriculture is how are we going to feed the world? And that's what farmers get up every day to do. They get up every day to help feed the world and do their tiny little part in feeding the world. And you are not going to feed the world on organic produce or grass fed beef. You're just not going to do it. It takes a lot more
Yep.
time. Like a grass-fed um, cow takes a lot more like longer life cycle, a longer time to get to market weight than a corn-fed cow. And same like produce. If you're growing strawberries or lettuce or whatever, you're going to have pests. So you have to use pesticides if you're going to grow like a larger scale. And now there's innovations where, there's hydroponics where you can potentially grow on a large scale some of those produce items without and in a very controlled environment. And so there's innovations that are continuing to be out there that could lend to someday we can feed the world on organic. But as it sits today, like I don't think that we can do that. And it's important to like kind of separate those. And if you want to go out and buy organic, great, do it because you're supporting an organic farmer. And so I think that's important to remember too, is even if you're buying organic,
Right.
you're still supporting a farmer. If you're but then don't villainize the large
Mm.
non-organic produce producers because they're trying to fill a different gap in the market.
Very, very well said. Yeah, because I think that's where on the reverse side of the marketing piece that is going after agriculture, people just simply don't consider the fact of that you just have the like your number one objective is to feed a large volume of people, and there's
Mhm.
going to naturally be quality control that hops into that conversation. But that's with anything because you want to talk about just general like food that's available. I mean, we're talking oatmeals, we're talking cereals, we're talking pop, we're talking like frozen food. Like there is so many worse things out there for you than even what some of these factory farms are producing, and we have to again be grateful for them. Um, so we've covered a lot of really good stuff. Before we go into more of the futuristic tech AI stuff, Mackenzie, could you actually give a very brief definition of the grass-fed piece because I'm personally curious, but also I know that's a buzzword in many cases.
Yeah. So it definition wise, it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's fed on pasture land instead of being fed a corn diet. Um, which the thing that I think is interesting about the grass fed beef discussion, like very just quick to wet your listeners' ears, is there's this whole push for environmentally friendly and being environmentally friendly. It actually has a larger carbon footprint or like methane production with a grass-fed animal than a corn-fed animal
Hmm.
in the beef section. So and I could be getting those mixed up because I am like not very involved in the beef industry, but it actually is less environmentally friendly to produce a grass-fed beef cow than it is to produce a corn-fed beef cow in in a couple of different metrics. But I think that's interesting because typically the people, and now I'm very much stereotyping here, so I apologize if this isn't an accurate stereotype for everybody, but it very much so seems like the people that are buying and paying for grass-fed beef are the people that are super health conscious and care about the environment. But then it's like when you realize that it's actually less environmentally friendly, it goes back to like this is fact or this is emotion, not facts. And um, which can be applied to a lot of different things. Like there's a ton of funny stories about like environmentally friendly and what that means and what people think it means versus what it
Right.
actually is. Like I heard a story of an electric vehicle that was driving and they needed to charge their battery. So they pull up to a gas station. And now this isn't all of them, but they pull up to a gas station and the gas station is running a gas powered generator to charge the electric vehicle. And it's like, yeah, like that doesn't make sense. And so when you really dig into like some of the science behind these things, it's like, all right, yeah, we can like grass-fed beef, but we just have to be okay that maybe it's not as good for the environment as corn-fed beef. And and so just things like that or like, all right, what does it actually take to charge an electric vehicle or make the battery in an electric vehicle? Like what's the environmental impact of that? And so I think we like to think that everything makes sense and these talking points sound great, but sometimes they don't when you actually
Yeah.
start digging into it.
Well, and the kind of final layer I'll throw into this, and this has been the reoccurring theme, is the power and influence of marketing in today's world. People have gotten
Mhm.
so good at this, and it can completely mislead and distort what reality is, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. My favorite amendment is the first one, so you should have the right to do all of this stuff. But just as a consumer, you should be able to dig in and do your homework a little bit further. But I think it's big to address for most common consumers and people that would be potentially listening to this is like what's like a baseline on some of these differences, and is there really differences? So I appreciate you touching on that. We're going to kind of push pause and switch into a different gear for the podcast now. So, one thing that me and you have talked quite a bit about in the past is just AI and how that is, in general, going to affect the world, obviously in the agriculture world as well. So, um, I think a good place to start here is what is maybe some of the cooler technologies or maybe futuristic concepts in agriculture with AI and tech that you have either been to a conference and seen or just in your own experience?
Yeah, and I I'll preface this with saying like I feel like I've seen very little too, but just it's starting to be a real conversation. And a conference that I was at a couple of months ago kind of really started opening my eyes to the AI conversation a little bit more. Cause like you hear AI and you're like, man, this is new technology. It's scary, maybe a little bit, but this is so new. And this conference that I was at, a lady from Microsoft actually was speaking, and she's like, well, artificial intelligence actually has been around for a long time. Like artificial intelligence is Siri on your iPhone or Hey
Mm,
Alexa. Like that's a form of artificial intelligence. Um, and so I think where the buzzwords getting today of AI is this like generative AI with Chat GPT. And this gal in this conference explained it where AI is just taking information that is found on the internet and like giving you that information. You're like, hey Siri, like answer this complex question, and it'll search the internet and give you an answer based on information that's already out there. Generative AI is taking information that's out there on the web and it's creating a new product with it or something new. And so there's a article that I think is funny and kind of plays to this a little bit, but also plays to like the scary parts of generative AI. And a lawyer used Chat GPT or a similar service. There's a couple different names for it, but used Chat GPT to like create closing arguments for a case that they were prosecuting. And this Chat GPT made up court cases, and it made a really great like closing statement, but the court cases in it were made up. And so this, I think this lawyer is actually getting sued because he didn't do the
mm,
due diligence to dig into like, oh, these are actually court cases. But it just shows that like, hey, it's taking all these different things and it's making something new. And so I think when you think about generative AI in the ag industry, there's a lot of companies doing like some pretty cool things about, hey, you can ask Chat GPT or something similar about an agronomy issue that you're having with your plant. Like, is it presenting some kind of symptoms that show that it's not growing as it should be, or it's a different color than normal? You can ask questions and it comes up with something new, or it might come up with a whole like fertilizer chemical prescription for your field. And so I think
mm.
those are some things that are out there. Um, yeah, I think the um, front end is kind of limitless, and there's a lot of things being thrown around. Like there's this new technology in equipment, see and spray technology, where you have a piece of equipment, typically fertilizer or chemical, that's going down the fields, and it sees and senses an area that needs more of a certain nutrient. And so just in that area, it's going to be giving more of a nutrient. Or if it sees a weed in a certain area, it's like, okay, we're going to spray this weed with a chemical to kill the weeds. And so things like that are like starting to develop, like drones. It's like, okay, now we're like mapping out chemically. And I mean, I don't know all the technical details, but it just kind of like blows my mind when you hear things. And I think there's a lot of use in AI. And how it relates to ag. I think one of the things you're going to have trouble with is the adoption of it, though. I think,
Mm,
you kind of have two camps of farmers, and you have the camp that's like, yeah, what's a new technology? How can we get better at what we're doing? Or improve it just a tiny little tweak, and maybe that's using an AI product or application. But then you're going to have the farmers too that are like, well, been farming this way. If it's not broke, why would we fix it? Like, I don't need some app on my phone to tell me um, how this should go. And I think it's great to think about how awesome this can be, how awesome AI and generative AI could be, and revolutionary for the ag industry, and a lot of other industries too. But I think we need to think about the potential side effects or the unintended consequences. And I don't think everyone thinks about that. Like, we're talking about our food supply here. And when you start talking about food supply and how things are grown, like, it can be really scary if you're having a computer tell you what to do with your food or how to raise your food. And I just think that there's things that I'm sure I haven't even thought of that could be, but honestly, it's a matter of food security. I think when you start talking about some of these like very new, like not widely accepted technologies that are like being involved, and so I think that's something that people need to consider too.
yeah, well, and I would say to that um, the somewhat of the elephant in the room, the way I interpret AI, and this is all markets, is that it could outperform people.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where, if you're sitting there and you are nervous, and quite candidly, there's going to be some industries that get shut down, and AI can just outperform you. That's not a fault of us. We're just naturally flawed. And when you're dealing with something that complex and smart, that's just kind of the natural course of things. Much like going to a library to get an encyclopedia to look something up, Google is just that much more efficient to do that. So I think it's always that conversation when it talks about that, like AI being implemented, is okay, will this, and how many people will this kind of put out of the market? And then I will say though, in our lifetime, we'll see some crazy shit, but I think in the next 10 years, it's more so, I think we can work alongside AI. Like I feel like that's kind of the cool, or should be how it's viewed. Basically, is like we'll always do what we always did, but at the same token, like you were mentioning, proactive people are going to grab this tech and work alongside of it to create a more efficient product or more efficient process.
Yeah, and I think something, I totally agree with all of that, and it's like, yeah, it's probably going to replace jobs, but I think about too the I'm probably more of a pessimist when it comes to AI, and I think about, okay, what are the potential harmful side effects? And there's Senate hearings and legislature that's trying to get passed, or policy that's trying to be written right now about how do we govern AI, and like what is ethical AI, and ethical regulations around this. Because one of the things is how do you prevent generative AI or chat GPT from giving a quote unquote harmful answer? And it's like, well, yes,
Mm-hmm.
obviously there are some things that are harmful that everyone would agree with is morally wrong and harmful. But I think there's some things, and we've seen this probably over the last couple of years, where there are certain things that are considered harmful that maybe is not a universal harmful or as black and white as, oh yeah, murdering is wrong. Like, there's some things that I think So it's who's going to determine what's harmful or misinformation, and that kind of goes to the media and in general is a big conversation. But when you're having this AI feed you new answers, yeah, who's filtering this? Like, whose lens are we looking through? Like, what bias is this looking through? And I think that's something that's important to kind of think about and remember too.
So I know we were just talking a little bit on that governance concept and whatnot. What I guess I might throw back to you is it almost sounds like though through AI or maybe through tech a little bit more that it's more accurate and more efficient though as far as being able to, let's say, spray weeds more efficiently with less chemicals or growing a better crop with less material that you're working with. So did you see anything like that as far as the tech side of things, or am I really trying to like making a good excuse for AI on why we should use it?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are a lot of good uses for new technologies in the ag industry, like the see and spray technology. I think there's potential for that to develop into something that's widely used, but um, the way I understand how it's working right now is it's not
Mm,
actually more efficient. It's a little bit more time consuming just because like all the technology isn't fully developed to where you could use it on a larger scale. And so I think there's a lot of cool things out there that are like small scale, like how are we going to use these and then how do we develop them into a large scale use? And I think that's where it goes cuz like yeah, things that you're like, all right, I see there's this issue and I'm just going to spray this small area for the issue. Like logically, you would think, oh, I'd use less chemicals or I'd use less fertilizer because if the whole field doesn't need it, then I'm not putting it on the whole field. But I think there's like logistical issues that need to be worked out. And I'm by like no means an expert on this see and spray technology, but I think it could be a really cool technology that could eventually lead to more efficiencies. But I think like in the early stages of tech development, it's like, all right, yes, this is a good concept. Now, how do we make it work in
yeah, I
reality?
love that. Well, and that's where the magic happens, and that's where I get most entertainment is like, how do we actually coexist with this stuff? Because the same folks, and I can say I'm in this camp too, that were afraid and are a little bit afraid of AI would be natural to those folks with the internet and that coming up and social media coming up. It has completely evolved us for the better. One could argue maybe not, but I think just the availability of resources we have today, our ancestors would just shit a brick if they saw and understood everything that we have, and that will only get better. So I think that's more so where I'm coming from as far as the future with AI, and
Yeah.
maybe when we're in our 50s, 60s, and 70s, if we're grateful enough to live to that age, we're going to see some pretty incredible things. But there's no doubt that our children or our children's children will be fully integrated with AI bots, AI robots, AI XYZ drones, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. I hope it's my children's children so I don't have to live through that because I mean, I'm in my 20s, later 20s, and I'm like, I feel like I'm an old grandma sometimes when it comes to technology. Like, I tend to revolt a little bit against it, but like I said, I'm also a little bit pessimistic and I see the downsides of it a lot of times. And you know, maybe place more emphasis on potential negative impacts of some of these technologies, including AI. But there are a lot of really cool things. I mean, my dad works in construction and they've done virtual reality goggles and they can walk through a new construction project as it's built and it's not built yet. And so like things like that, like that's really
Right.
cool. Like, but virtual reality, alternate universes, like there's also some negative like potentials there that I think people don't. And so like with anything, we have to be responsible and use discernment on what's an appropriate use of this technology and what's maybe something that we shouldn't use this technology for. And that's something that I heard in one of the conferences talking about AI too. It's we shouldn't be asking the question, what can AI be doing? What can generative AI do? We should like be asking the question, what should it be doing
Mm.
and what shouldn't it be? And so I thought that was kind of a cool kind of statement or thought.
Yeah, because going back to more of the integration piece, um, we view our phones as a tool, our social media as a tool, and everything as a tool. In the same light, we should view AI as a tool. So, to your point of should and should not, that's a very complicated landscape because a it's early in the game and we don't 100% know, but b there are going to be unfortunate situations that happen as it does with everything that gets brought into the market, and those consequences will just have to happen because that's just what happens when you integrate that stuff. But um, I do have to ask more of a personal question in the sense of what about you? Desire is not the right word. What is it that gets you to having that stance? Because like I think about more so for myself, like I'm just kind of this optimist that kind of floats in the air sometimes of like, oh, everything will be okay, like da 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 da. But I feel like you are intelligently enough to know immediately, like, hey, like what's some of the negative or what are some of the consequences? Is that just you kind of playing devil's advocate naturally, or do you feel like that's just kind of how your mind operates? Because both of us, if it is a good relationship, because we can't just have a bunch of optimists out there that float around, and we can't just have people that have pessimism. So I'm curious if that's something that you kind of have as a natural wiring, or if it's just your kind of mindset around new information.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I don't think I've thought about it before, but I think I probably am wired to be a little bit more of a pessimist, or the word I like to use instead of pessimist because that sounds negative, so like spinning it in more of a positive light is critical. And
Mm,
I just I like to think through things, and I think I'm naturally inquisitive. And so when someone tells me something, I want to know why. When someone says, oh, this is amazing, it's the new groundbreaking thing, everyone's going to be using it, everyone's going to be doing it, I'm like, well, why? Like, if everyone else is doing it, what what's wrong with it, kind of thing. Like, nothing. Here's a quote that one of my leaders shared one time. They said, nothing's ever as good as it seems or as bad as it seems. And so if someone's
beautiful.
trying to sell you something as like, this is amazing, this is going to make your life so much better, I'm like, all right, how is it going to make my life better? And then most of the time there are unintended consequences to things, and I just think I'm critical of those. And then with anything, it's like, all right, we need to weigh the risks, like what are the unintended consequences. You brought up social media a little bit earlier, and so it's like, all
Yeah,
right, social media is an amazing tool that has created this whole new job market for people, like
right.
influencers. Like, are you kidding me? Like, how awesome is that? Like, that people can just share what they're doing in their life, and then they make enough money to live off of that. Like, that's crazy. But I think there on the flip side, there are negative consequences to social media too. Like, think about what it's doing in young girls' minds with comparison and,
Oh,
oh, I have
yeah.
to live up to this, I'm never good enough, and what it's doing to their self-esteem. And not even just young girls. Like, I hear a ton of women talk about that all the time. They always feel like they have to live up to everybody else's lives on social media. And it's, I heard one time, it's like, all right, you're sitting here watching everyone else's highlight reel on social media, and you're
Mm,
comparing your life to the highlight reel of someone else's life. And it's like, most people aren't sharing the negative stuff on social media. They're not sharing the fights with their husbands. They're sharing the, oh, my husband's amazing, he bought me flowers and a new outfit and took me out to this awesome dinner. They're not talking about how much they argued in the car on the way there or some of those things, just as an example. But I think, yeah, there's positives and negatives to everything. And I think, yeah, it's just a critical thinking of like, okay, Is it really as good as it seems? If so, great, let's jump on board and do it. Or like, what are the negative things that people don't think about?
Yeah, so it sounds like that's more predicated on risk more so
Yeah.
than pessimism, as you had mentioned. I just felt like that was a little bit unique, though, and that's why I wanted to touch on a little bit because I had noticed that just a little bit in your verbiage, but I think that that actually makes you a better banker because, in general, as a financial institution, there are these questions of risk, and that's
Mhm.
just kind of hardwired in to know, okay, what is the risk involved here? But you have to have both those kind of optimistic early birds that'll be super adventurous and crash and burn with folks that have that kind of natural risk aversion. And I shouldn't even say risk aversion. They're just, it's the ability to question things before you fully move forward. That's
Mhm.
maybe the best way to say it. But
Yeah.
um, so the only other thing to cover on the tech and AI side of things, to kind of get that rounded out, and then we'll move into a little bit of personal development. Um, so as far as maybe machine usage in the dairy world or farming equipment, and you may not even know this, but I'm just curious, are there any maybe new and improved combines or tractors or milking equipment that has come up into that world at all? Because I think technology is like just ever evolving, incredible thing that now in today's world we have so many different vehicles to choose from and just construction equipment and all that other stuff. So if you do have a little bit on this, feel free to run. If you don't, we'll I just more so figured I'd bounce it off of you.
Yeah. It's a good question, and I probably don't even see 5% of what's out there. And so like I'm sure there's a ton more out there, but like one really cool thing, I was up in North Dakota at a like ag tech week um earlier this year, and one of the cool pieces of equipment that I thought, and I don't remember the name of the company that had this or was developing this equipment, but with environmental sustainability being a big topic, cover crops is also a natural thing that kind of leads to, okay, this helps with cover crops help with soil erosion. Well, one of the issues you
Mm,
have when you plant cover crops is how do you get your seed when you're going to plant your corn or your beans down through the cover crop debris that's on top of the soil, protecting the soil there. And a traditional planter just doesn't do a good job at that and doesn't do a good job at getting that plant to emerge back through the cover crop to grow big. And this company made a implement, I think, that would just go and hook up to your planter as you have it now. And it was a water jet. And by water jet, I mean like if you
oh,
stuck your finger under there, it would cut your fingers off because it's just that high pressured water. And so that gets it to break through the debris of the cover crop, and then it's planting the seed down there pretty much simultaneously as it's like cutting through the cover crop. And the emerge
wow.
is a lot better on this company that was presenting had two pictures, and it was like pretty cool the difference. And so like that's just one example of like, man, how simple is this? We're talking about like literally using water, high pressured water, but it seemed, yeah, when I heard that presentation, I'm like, man, this is so simple, but yet like so like kind of groundbreaking, and like why didn't I think of that type of thing? So
Well, I that kind of stuff gets me excited because I love innovation to begin with, but just thinking of how that stuff all correlates to making the world a more productive and efficient and safe place. That's just the element of technology and innovation that is just so vital to the human experience. So I appreciate you touching on that. Any other things that come to mind before we completely rotate into the personal development role?
well, something that I feel like kind of transitions well to personal development, still in talking about the innovation, is that it all takes a mindset shift. Like you have to be willing to change your mind and to change your habits and change the way you do something. Like this farmer that's going to put a water jet kind of implement on the back of his planter is going to have to change his mind about, well, that's not the way we've always done it. And so I think with innovating and doing things differently and finding better ways to do things, you have to be in a good mindset to be able to do that. And you have to be willing to try and probably be willing to fail too. Like with innovations, nobody wants to be the first person to implement or use a new innovation because they don't want to be the one that fails. Like, what if this thing doesn't work? And so they want to be the second or third or fourth person to implement this new technology, not the first one, because they want someone else to fail first and then they can figure out if it works or not by someone else. But and I think there's some logic behind that, but I also like, all right, if you want to be the new innovative thing, you're going to have to be willing to fail. And just that's a whole
Yeah,
mindset
well,
shift.
look at you as a podcast guest making a wonderful transition from topic to topic. We might have the Mackenzie Lewis podcast
Yeah, sorry.
coming in creation here after. No, it's good. I love it. It makes my job a heck of a lot easier because you're already kind of making that switch. But um, just to talk a little bit on mindset, and I agree with you in terms of being open minded and being innovative. That is a huge thing in personal development and leadership. Um, What's the first or second or third thing that you were introduced to that made you even kind of acknowledge this concept of what personal development is?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I think it's always kind of been something that I've been hardwired for, maybe. And it's something I've always thought about of,
Mm,
all right, maybe that's not the case. I think probably my dad. I think I would blame my dad for this like personal development mentality. And it's like my dad was a man that like is a man that works very hard at his job and is always trying to be better at what he's doing. And so that kind of just like I saw that example in my dad of like, all
mm,
right, yeah, like I always want to be better. Like my dad always like kind of pushed me to strive for new heights. Like, all right, you got to get good grades in school and you like what do you want to do in college and like is that, like and he would challenge me on things too. Like, all right, is this what you really want to do or would something else be a better option? And so I think that was just like taught to me from a young age of like, all right, I can always be doing better. There's always room for improvement. And it's just got this like my mind kind of hooked on that sometimes. Not in the fact of like, because I do think it can be harmful to be negative on ourselves all the time and be like, man, I'm always falling short. I can never, like, I'm never good enough because I'm always striving for the next thing. It's like, no, like those two things don't have to be in the same
right.
category. Like, I can be very happy with where I'm at in life, but still want to improve. And it's like, just I think that's important to note too, because I think sometimes you can get into this like I'm always striving to be better, and then it can be harmful because you're viewing yourself as never good enough or always falling short. And it's like, nope, that's not the case. Like we should be happy where I'm
Mm,
at, thankful for how far I've come and where I've grown so far, but then also realize that I still have a bunch of growth to do as well.
yeah, very, very well said. So I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that, and it is going to keep you on the thinking stage. So how would you define personal development? And the reason I ask this is because everyone's definition is slightly different. I think you had some really good pieces there as you were describing just how to evolve over time. But just to put you on the spot a little bit, how would you define that, or what does it mean to you?
Yeah. I think one of the first things that come to mind when defining personal development is like constantly trying to be the best version of myself and constantly trying to grow as a person, expand my mindset, like, you know, little side note, one of the things about me is I love talking with people that I disagree with because I learn new
Ooh.
opinions on, like I learn new arguments for things. And then that either makes my argument stronger because I'm like, oh yeah, I see that, but this is why you're wrong. But then also But sometimes I change my mind, and I think we have to be willing to change our minds to grow. But I think, at the core, personal development is really just like constantly working to become the best versions of ourselves. And
Mm.
and faith plays a big role in my life. And so I think we're constantly working towards becoming something. And we have to be okay that we're never gonna like reach that. Like, what's a perfect human being? What's like a I'm developed, like, when did you get there? Like, whatever there is, like, when
Develop,
did you
yeah.
reach the finish line? And it's like, I think we have to be okay that, like, we're not really gonna reach a finish line. There's never really a finish line in personal development. It's like there's always something more I can be doing or different that I can be trying, or like, all right, a little new habit. And maybe we get most of the way there, wherever that line is, but then we move the line again. We, think of a new, better thing. Like, I think it's just kind of a mindset of like, all right, let's constantly be trying to be the best versions of ourselves, and that line moves all the time.
Um, and I think just to really continue to carry on to that, the purpose of becoming that better version is so you're able to operate in the world in a much better capacity. Like the quality and potency is going to be better the more research and the more you're kind of debating and getting that solidification. And I applaud you for that, because a lot of people, first off, don't even like to put themselves in those situations, but also that you have the ability to set the ego aside and say, okay, that idea is actually better than my own. I now have that, and I can legitimately stand on these 2 feet of this is my true opinion, because a lot of people cannot even be open to new information, which is ridiculous. But um, so I think personally for me, I really have been on this concept lately of when I was, I would say 25 or so, just getting into this personal development space. I had this ambition of like trying to figure everything out so quickly. So then that way I could become that, like I could experience more of life in that better quality. And recently I've really kind of understood like this is such a path that you're on, and there's no way to speed up the path. And even if you're able to read 15 different books in a year, you're still only going to receive the messages that you're going to receive when you need to receive it. And so like I've been able to adjust to my mindset of patience, but using what you're saying as well. So this good kind of back and forth of let's be patient and play the long game, but in the years, the months, the weeks, let's just slowly chip away at new information, new books, and just trying to continue to be great on that. So, was there anything maybe that you've read, a podcast that you've listened to, or really just anything like what was maybe some of that initiation to outside of your dad being of this mindset of constant evolution and getting better? And this is very open ended. So, if there's things that have influenced you more than others, I'd be curious to hear about that.
Yeah. I think when I really started digging into resources, it was like kind of post college, and I just saw a lot of anxiety and depression in myself, which,
Mm,
because I think I was in that camp of, man, I have so far to go and I'm not good enough. I can't do this. Like, just had that negative mentality. And so
mm,
I'm like, this is no way to live. And so I started, I think, podcasting kind of blew up around that time, books, like, I've never been a huge nonfiction reader. I love fiction books a little bit more than I like nonfiction, but there's some really great nuggets in a lot of nonfiction books, and podcasts too. I kind of think of podcasts like audiobooks. And so,
yeah, for sure.
like, some of those resources that have really been impactful, or some of those people, I think, like, one guy that comes to mind immediately is David Goggins. And like, maybe just because I want to be him, I don't know, I probably can never, but like, he's crazy, like absolutely nuts. And I'm reading his like first book, like Can't Hurt Me, right now, and the stuff that he goes through and did, I'm like, this is just absolutely insane. Like, no normal person should be able to do this. Like, running marathons on broken legs, or like, what? I mean, he lost an extreme amount of weight in like a very, very short period of time to qualify for the Navy SEALs. And um, he talks and I've listened to podcasts where he's been interviewed and working through his book now, but um, one of the things he talks about is like most people only operate at 40% of their capacity, like their brain capacity, or just their 40% of their potential. And it's like we get to that 40% line and that's where it's comfortable. We're like, all right, this is as much as we can do. I mean, and he's an ultra marathon runner, so he equates it to running a lot. And he's like, all right, this is as far as I can go, this many miles. And that's where it starts getting uncomfortable. But as someone who he has literally run on broken legs, or just decided one day that he's going to run 100 miles in 24 hours to qualify for this other race, it's like, all right, I'm just going to go out and run 100 miles, like no big deal. And he does it with a lot of pain, but he had to like push through that mental 40% barrier and be like, oh yeah, I'm actually capable of a lot more than I think I am. But that 40% is like the comfort zone, and I need to like push into the uncomfortable zone more often to get used to that and actually expand my like capacity or ability a little bit. And I mean, that's something I think about a lot of like, man, how am I operating today? And when do I stop because things get uncomfortable or it's
Mhm.
hard? It's like, no, okay, like just keep pushing through and you probably can do a little bit more than you think you can do.
I am just so happy you brought up that name. He is someone
Yeah.
for me that is deeply inspiring, and I think that the reason that God put that man on the earth is to literally tell everyone that they do not have any excuses at all. I mean, with what he went through and to how he became to where he is today, it was like this. God's like, all right, I'm going to give you guys somebody that's crazy and that has this buffer that says you ain't got nothing on this guy, and he's going to, overcome all this stuff. But,
Yeah.
and maybe to speak on that a little bit, and I talking on more so this personal development, nonfiction and arena. So this is what I think is so pivotal, because you have the ability to relate to someone and read and learn about someone that has gone through life either a little bit before you, during, or after, where it's like, okay, they have overcome these certain challenges and they're now giving me this advice on how to deal with it. Anytime you're inputting that, like the software in your brain is just upgrading because of this really good, just hard, good truths of life. And to just leverage that book, some of the early principles that I love is just the accountability mirror. I mean, what a great piece to go through. And then I don't know, I'm not sure where you're at 100% within the book, so I don't want to spoil it at all. But there is a piece in there about oh my gosh, it's going to slip my mind now. Taking souls. Have you got to that part or no?
I think I have. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Because that's another thing that I think is like an incredible mindset shift of like, hey, no matter what's in front of me, I'm going to be so perseverant with this thing that I'm going to take its soul and that it doesn't have power over me. I
Hmm.
love that. I'm not one to speak on it like David does. So for the listeners, I would encourage you to go out and get that book. But
Yeah.
so you've read and are reading that one. What are some other things that have been on your agenda? Because, and I guess I should preface this because we've known each other for, I would say, maybe 2 years now, give or take. And then there's been a couple books that have been mentioned and whatnot, but we're both kind of in this phase of reading nonfiction books just to, increase our mindset. So what are some other maybe titles that come to mind, or some other podcasts that you've really enjoyed?
Yeah. There's a couple more. So one, I have to force myself to read nonfiction. So in all reality, like confession time, I've been reading David Goggins' book for like over a year now because I just like, and I'm also one that nonfiction books, I'll have like 5 or 6 or 7 of them going at a time. And then it's like, all
Mm,
right, I'm kind of in the mood for a David Goggins kick in the butt, and then I'm also in the mood for a like Jenny Allen Christian living, like, all right, let's feel good and type. So I have like 5 or 6 nonfiction books going at one time, in addition to the fiction books I'm reading. So I know many people think I'm absolutely crazy and nuts, but it's like, it's nonfiction. You don't need to read it like all in one sitting. So to help with that, I read James Clear's Atomic Habits, and that was absolutely amazing. And he was actually one that talked about, like, get 1% better, just build on it, and has a ton of like habit stacking. And all right, if you already are in the habit of doing something and you want to start reading a nonfiction book more regularly, like, just do that. So that's kind of partially where I got the idea from, of reading like 10 pages a day in a nonfiction book. And then
Beautiful.
also, like, I've listened to Andy Frisella a little bit, and he like
Mm.
has the 75 hard program, which I've never done. I've thought about doing aspects of it. There's people on social media that do like the 75 soft challenge, where it's not quite as intense. But I think he talks too about one of the things that you have to do every day for 75 days is read 10 pages in a nonfiction book. And it has to be a hardcover. You can't listen to the audio. And so, like, those are two people that I've kind of taken from, of like,
Mm.
okay. And I think it's important to understand why I'm doing something, why we're
Yeah.
doing things in personal development. So, like, why would I want to force myself to read a nonfiction book? And force is maybe not the right word, but like, why is that something that I want to do or wish I did more often as a habit? And it's like, well, because I get a lot out of it. Like, I learn these tools that help make me a better person. I learn how to push myself more. I learn how to like implement habits that I think are really great. And so, and thought processes, you learn a new thought process. You get a new outlook on something. If you're reading a biography, it's like you're learning something constantly. And so that's why. And so, like, understanding my motivation for doing it, of like, I want to get better, I want to learn something and improve, that's kind of helped me. you know Typically I read in the morning, and so it's like, all right, there's definitely days where I get up and I'm like, I'm kind of tired still. I'm just going to scroll on my phone, and I don't want to actually read a nonfiction book. But it's like, no, if I sit down, and once I get past like the first page or two of like, all right, this kind of sucks, then it's like, oh yeah, this is actually a really good book. I'm learning a ton from this. And then I go way more than 10 pages. But like, remembering the why behind it has really helped in when implementing new habits. And I'm sure that's something in Atomic Habits too. Like, I've read that book, I read a little over a year and a half ago, and so I don't remember everything. But um another thing that has been really transformational for me has been um this thought model and thought process. And there's a couple different people that talk about it. Dr. Caroline Leaf talks a lot about your thoughts and how you can control your thoughts. Um,
Mm.
but then also there's the life coach school with, I think it's Brooke Castillo, and she has this thought model process where it's like, all right, base, and I'm not going to get all the steps right, and there's a ton of graphics online, but essentially it's, there's a fact, and then we have that fact elicits some kind of emotion,
Mhm.
and then that emotion elicits a thought in our brain, and then we react or don't react to the emotion that we're having in our brain. And so it's it's kind of interesting to think about, like, all right, what's the fact, and then what's my thoughts about it, and then I
Mm.
can actually change my thoughts about something. Like like the example before of, hey, personal development, I want to grow and become a better version of myself. That thought is, all right, that's motivating to me now, because this excites me. Getting to become a better person and learning and growing is exciting. And so that kind of creates a motivated feeling.
Yeah.
And the thoughts that I have around that are like, I want to do things that better myself. Versus I could have a thought that, all right, personal development, I need to be better, I'm not good enough. And then that's going to elicit like depressed feelings and emotions. And maybe I'm going to feel sad and may not be motivated to make changes. And so it's like, all right, what kind of action or reaction do I want? Well, I want to be motivated. And so, what are the thoughts that I'm going to be telling myself that's going to make me motivated? And then also in your life, when you're thinking things that you're like, man, I really wish I wasn't this way, or I don't like this thought that I have. It's like, all right, well, what do you want to do? And then what types of thoughts are going to help you get there? And I probably butchered explaining that, but I think it just all goes to the point of we have control over our thoughts, and we can be reactive to our thoughts, or we can be proactive and control our thoughts. And that kind of like um, proactive versus reactive um, is coming from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is another kind of book that everyone's talked about. And I'm like, man, this is awesome. And just recently started reading because at work I have a mentee and she also wanted to read books. And I'm like, hey, would you just want to read this book together and we can help kind of hold each other accountable? And so that's been awesome.
Well, and every single title that you're mentioning on this podcast, I mean, these are the heavy hitters in the industry, both past and current. So anytime you're reading any of this material, I feel like it's going to be a net positive in some way, shape, or form. But the first thing I want to do is congratulate you on that, because it takes a lot of courage to dive into the world of personal development to begin with. But I'm sure as you're finding the resistance that you're facing on a daily basis is more so, I think, coming from you're deliberately and voluntarily challenging yourself, because when you read those books, they force you to do exercises like self-awareness and what are these different concepts, and then that challenges you to believe in your belief system and your values, and you're like, holy shit, maybe I'm not the person who I thought I was. So all that can get to the really deep stuff. But I think that the balance of fiction and nonfiction is really good. But I love also that I think future Mackenzie would appreciate what current Mackenzie is doing as far as asking those questions and going there. Because if you give yourself enough time, in 6 months, if you've read, let's say, 3 books, start to finish, you're totally a different person on the other side of those books, whether you feel it or not. And like Atomic Habits, I mean, you could read that, or probably should read that book like once a year. I'm even telling myself that because it's so good. I mean, 7 Habits is so good. Goggins' book, so good. But it's really cool. And I guess maybe to kind of plug into the mentoree setting, because like sometimes reading by yourself, it is what it is. Sometimes people love it, sometimes people don't. Do you feel like you're getting more out of that from like a teaching perspective? Like, do you guys discuss that book at all, or like, what does that look like? Because sometimes talking about it can really allow things to settle in a little bit further too.
Yeah, we do talk about it, and the discussion more focuses around like, okay, what are some action steps we can take, or what are things we want to change because of this, which I think is really cool. But 100%, I think discussing books or podcasts that you listen to with other people like helps you understand it on a deeper level too. And like I listen to podcasts all the time. Like I go through phases of like, all right, I'm consuming all of this information, listening to podcasts, reading books, and then I like go a little bit of time where I'm like, all right, I'm just going to listen to music for a while because I need to shut off the consumer part of my brain for a bit. But like there's so many times where I'm like, man, this is so good, like kind of like groundbreaking, and I want to share it with someone, and I like also want to get their thoughts, like what did they think about when they said this. And so I think having the my mentee like reading that book with me has been helpful
Mm.
in that we get to discuss some of it. On the podcast side, one of the podcasts that I've been absolutely loving is Modern Wisdom with Chris Williamson. And he, I think, has had over 700 episodes. They're more the long form, like hour and a half to 3.5 hours, like kind of like Joe Rogan or something. And he covers a wide variety of topics, like talks about dating and but also talks about like business and developing new businesses. And he really just goes into like the psychology behind why people do what they do, which is super intriguing. And to your comment about doing things that your future self would help you on, I think it was one of his podcasts that I was just listening to that he talked about, like, ask yourself, like, what would the tomorrow me be thankful that I did today? Like,
So good.
the tomorrow me is going to really appreciate that I'm eating healthy today, or that I went for a walk, or that I worked out, or that I like read a book, it's, and so thinking about that kind of like takes it off of the short term and focuses more on the long term, which I listened to like an article or a podcast interview that Jocko Willink did, and he was also another Navy SEAL, and he talks about like we need to focus more on the long term instead of short term. And like he has these like tactical terms for it that like I wrote down somewhere because I wanted to remember it and now I can't remember what the terms are. But like just that long term thinking instead of like immediate instant gratification. Like we need to start being okay with delayed gratification more than the instant. And yeah, so they all build on each other, right? Like every book that you read, every podcast, it's like, oh yeah, like reading 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the first habit is being proactive. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Well, when you start reading it, it's like, oh yeah, I've heard this in other podcast episodes or stuff about this in other books that I've read. And it just, yeah, builds off of each other, I think.
Yeah, and that's where I love to live, and I'm glad you're entering into that environment because you never know how one or two or three of those things mesh together. So as we were just talking about how the podcast, the reading, and all that kind of comes together. There was an old timer. I don't know if you know the name Jim Rohn or Jim Ron at all, but he is like back in the day, 80s, 70s, 60s guy talking about personal development. And the way he framed it was so beautiful in the sense of your mind is a garden. And within that garden, you're either putting on fresh, good fertilizer or you're letting the weeds grow in. And just that analogy of the fertilizers, the books, the podcasts, all that good stuff. The weeds are the nasty habits and drama that you're bringing in there. And it's constant battle back and forth. But the thing I've noticed more in the last 2 years is how many ideas come from the compounding effect of all that stuff coming in. Do you relate to that? Or how would you talk to your younger self if you had to motivate yourself to get into why personal development is important?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. It's the compounding effect. It's, in banking, compounding interest really pays off. Like that's why everyone should be investing in their 401k early, because you have a long time to glean off of that. And I think that's probably what I'd tell my younger self. Like if you start now and you start when you're young, like it's just going to pay off even more and you're going to just be that much further ahead on this road. And I think something I would tell my younger self too is how much everything is connected. Like mind, body, spirit, it's all connected too. And it's like, all right, this stuff is like feeding my mind. But one of the things I've been learning recently through a bunch of books and podcasts is like what I'm like consuming for my body, or like how I'm working out or exercising activity. Like that impacts my mental health too, because when I'm not moving my body, when I'm eating a bunch of junk food, my brain just feels sluggish. When I'm not drinking water, like I can literally tell a difference in my brain function based on how much water I'm drinking, which is absolutely crazy to me. But it's just like everything is connected, and and that compounding interest. And so it's like, all right, yeah, take a holistic look at yourself, and then also, yeah, start when you're young, and it'll just keep paying off in major dividends later.
Oh man, it's good stuff, and the reason I want to kind of drive those points home is because if anyone listening is encouraged to get into this space, definitely do. There's a lot of value to add. Um, so I will use kind of the back half of this part of the podcast, and as we round out, so there's a couple of books that I have read recently that I'm just going to throw your way, whether to add to the
Yeah.
list or just to talk about a little bit, but. Um, what would you say is your definition or thoughts on emotional agility?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I have a book called Emotional Intelligence, and I have not read all of it yet, but I think I took a class on it that I like didn't pay a ton of attention to. But I think it's really important, and I think it's something that we should pay more attention to. Um, and I think, yeah, haven't read the book, but I think it's an important topic and something we should pay attention to. And it's on my to be read list. And like emotional agility, I think also, gosh, what was this term? Never mind. Go on with your next question.
No, you're good. You're good. The reason I bring that up is because oftentimes in personal development, I think people think of the 7 habits, they think of a David Goggins, they think of a Chris Williamson. But another element to personal development, or more that's not talked about enough, is emotional intelligence, emotional
Mhm.
healing, emotional agility. And it's not just like, okay, Nick read a personal development book. He's got a good mindset. He works out. It's all good. It's like, well, how do you heal your inner child? How do you handle your
Mhm.
emotions when you're feeling a certain way? How do you communicate your emotions to your spouse, to your family members? Like that is an area that I think is so overlooked because emotions, everyone has them, and a very small percentage of people know how to manage their emotions effectively. So what I would say, and you can take this or leave it. So I also possess emotional intelligence, the book. I also own emotional agility, and I would switch in emotional agility to before
Mhm.
emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence is more of a case study where it's like very dense reading material, and it's like reading the study, which if that's your forte, definitely go for it. I think agility is more so a 21st century version of what you need to know and what these emotions do. It's kind of like Atomic Habits was the 21st century version of Power of Habit. I'm not sure if you've heard of
Mhm.
Power of Habit, but
Yeah.
that's kind of those two together are a very, very powerful combo. Um, so yes, and then the last piece I was going to touch on, are there any books that you've read on spirituality that you really like, and how do you kind of consistently stay in tune with your spiritual health? Because I know that's another part of this, we'll say, core four of physical, mental,
Mhm.
emotional, and spiritual.
Yeah. Well, number one, I think that's probably really underrated is the Bible,
Hey, there we
which
go.
I know, right? Like who everyone says that. But I think it's really true. I think there's so much to learn from the Bible in leadership skills. I mean, there's a guy named Craig Rochelle that has a leadership like Christian leadership podcast. And it's like there's so many great, amazing principles in the Bible, like Psalms, and I mean, like look at Proverbs. Just read a single verse in Proverbs every day and try and learn and apply that principle. Or it's funny. My dad was calling me because he's doing this like workshop building culture thing at work, and he kind of like resists it a little bit. But I'm like, well, trying to stay positive. I'm like, what's the one thing you found? Like, did you even get one thing from this? Like, you had to have got one thing and taken away one good thing. And he's like, well, yeah, actually, like they said this quote, and I wrote it down on a sticky note and put it on my desktop. And he's like, I've actually used it when people call me on the phone. I've like looked at this as a reminder. But the quote was, um, be slow to speak and quick to listen. And
Mm.
that's a Bible verse. And it's like, okay, there's so many good classic principles that are from the Bible, and we just don't realize it. So, like, big plug for the Bible, read the Bible. It'll transform your spiritual life, I think, if you have a daily habit of like getting in the word. And then another one that I love is anything by John Eldredge. Like, he has a book called Get Back Your Life that's
Mm.
absolutely amazing. Resilient is one of his newer books, absolutely amazing. I haven't read one of his first books called Wild at Heart, but a lot of people rave about it. John Eldredge also does a podcast, so you can get him in book form and podcast form. And he talks a lot about slowing down and being
Mm.
intentional and like kind of getting out of the like rat race, like doing things to just do things, but like taking time to like meditate and like just be in union with God is one of the big things he talks about. And I think that's really important. And he has a really cool app called the Pause app, where it's just these short little meditations of like, hey, he's like, God, I give everything and everyone to you. Like, ultimately, if you believe in God as your creator, and just turning it all over to him and saying, hey, I can't control any of my life anyways. Like, you can, you're in control. I trust you. And just kind of like recentering on that and getting rid of some of the anxiety about like worrying about all the little details of life is pretty cool. So yeah, John Eldridge is a big one.
Oh man. So a couple of names that I had not heard, so I have the chance to go do some homework on that. As far as the Bible goes, I think that's just the one book that's always stood the test of time. I personally fall short of reading that every single day. I'm on my own kind of spiritual journey from that standpoint, but I think that anytime you are considering a religious text, anything in there is going to be more beneficial than not doing it. Like, even if
Mhm.
you aren't even a Christian, or if you have some other, spiritual thing that you believe in, ask and you shall receive, treat your neighbor how you want to be treated. Like, these are just the one-on-one things, but how often do we
Yeah.
actually honor that? And how often do we actually live in that capacity?
Mhm.
Is a good question to always kind of consider. So as far as us rounding this thing out, Mackenzie, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and coming on here and talking about some very kind of hot take agriculture items, some future agriculture items, and also some personal development. Right before we go off here, any final thoughts or comments on anything that is inspiring to you?
Yeah, I mean, I like to talk, so I could talk about any of these topics for a really long time. And so I'm just thankful that you had me as the first female guest, and hopefully it went okay. First podcast I was on, and it was a great experience. So thanks, Nick. You are a great host, and yeah, I just appreciate you having me. And like I said, I love talking about this stuff. So anytime you want to talk or chat about it, I'm here. I'm here to chat.
Yeah, this won't be the last time that you make it on the podcast, but it was a great time for us both to have the first lady on, and for your first time doing it, you did a very, very good job. I promise none of the answers that you said were scripted to those that are listening, but anyways, appreciate you guys listening in, and until next time, boys and girls and AI bots, because we were talking a little bit about AI. See you guys later.